Start cooking at 4 a.m. My wife's rich mother ordered, handing me the guest list. And make sure everything is perfect this time. My wife added. I smiled and said, of course. But at 3 a.m., I was at the airport instead. 30 hungry relatives arrived to find an empty kitchen. Look, I'm not saying I'm psychic or anything, but I knew the exact moment my Thanksgiving was about to get hijacked, and it happened precisely 5 seconds before Gloria actually materialized in my kitchen. That's how long it took for her perfume to announce her arrival. Some unholy combination of expensive floral notes and what I can only describe as the scent of impending doom mixed with Chanel No. 5. The fragrance wafted through my house like a chemical weapon, giving me just enough warning to plaster on my best fake smile before the door swung open without so much as a courtesy knock. Because apparently when you're Gloria Hartfield Montgomery, doors are merely suggestions and privacy is for peasants. She strutted in wearing what had to be a designer pantsuit that probably cost more than my car payment, her heels clicking against my tile floor with the authority of a judge's gavel. Everything about Gloria screamed, I'm in charge here. From her perfectly coiffed silver hair that hadn't moved since 1987 to the way she held her Hermes purse like it was both a fashion statement and a potential weapon. My mother-in-law didn't just enter rooms. She conquered them, planted a flag, and immediately started reorganizing the furniture in her mind. Marcus, darling, she said, and I use the term darling loosely here because the way she said it sounded more like peasant or disappointment. She didn't wait for me to respond before whipping out a piece of paper from her purse that unfolded like one of those magician's scarves that just keeps coming and coming. I'm talking 3 full pages of single-spaced, color-coded instructions that looked like it had been drafted by a team of lawyers and reviewed by the Pentagon. Here's the menu for Thanksgiving, she announced, sliding the manifesto across my kitchen counter like she was serving me court papers. I've taken the liberty of organizing everything by course, cooking time, and dietary restrictions. You'll need to start cooking at 4 a.m. sharp. 4 a.m., she said it the way dictators announce curfews, with absolutely zero room for negotiation or, basic human consideration for the fact that 4 in the morning is a time that should only exist for bakers, serial killers, and people catching international flights. I stared at the list, watching the words blur together into what looked like a recipe for a complete mental breakdown, served with a side of deep-fried resentment. 4 a.m., I repeated, hoping maybe I'd misheard, that she'd actually said 4 p.m., or better yet, for never o'clock. Just kidding. We're ordering pizza. Yes, 4 a.m., Gloria confirmed, adjusting her reading glasses that hung on a pearl chain around her neck. The turkey alone takes 6 hours, and that's if you actually know what you're doing. The implication hung in the air like her perfume, thick, suffocating, and impossible to ignore. Before I could formulate a response that wouldn't get me immediately divorced, Clara appeared from the living room, and I swear my wife had this gleam in her eye that I recognized from every rom-com where the protagonist realizes they're in over their head. She sided up next to her mother with a smile that would have been adorable if it wasn't currently being weaponized against my sanity. And make sure everything's perfect this time, honey, Clara added, reaching over to squeeze my arm in what I'm sure she thought was an encouraging gesture but felt more like a mob boss reminding me they know where I live. Perfect. The word hung there like an accusation. This was coming from the woman who once managed to burn cereal. And I'm not talking about oatmeal on the stove. I'm talking about regular cold cereal that she somehow decided to warm up in the oven and then forgot about for 45 minutes until the smoke alarm staged an intervention. This is the same person who thought al dente was an Italian rapper and once asked me, in complete seriousness, if you could substitute baking soda for baking powder because they're basically the same thing, right? But sure, she wanted Michelin star perfection from yours truly, the guy who learned to cook out of sheer survival necessity, because the alternative was a lifetime of wondering whether dinner would be edible or a fire hazard. I looked down at the list again, really taking it in this time. Herb roasted turkey with a compound butter that apparently required ingredients I'd need a passport to find. 3 types of potatoes, mashed, roasted, and some fancy gratin situation that required a mandolin slicer I definitely didn't own. Green bean casserole, but not the normal kind with French's fried onions that every sane American makes. No, this one required fresh haricots verts, because Gloria refuses to call them green beans like a normal person, and homemade crispy shallots. There was a whole section dedicated to pies. Pumpkin, pecan, apple, and something called a rustic pear galette that sounded like it required a French pastry degree. This is for 30 people, I said, doing the mental math and feeling my blood pressure spike with each calculation. 32, actually, Gloria corrected, because of course she did. Aunt Meredith is bringing her new boyfriend. And you know how Cousin Jennifer always brings those dreadful children who eat like linebackers. I smiled. I smiled so hard I thought my face might crack and fall off in pieces on my kitchen floor. It was the kind of smile you see in hostage videos, where the person is trying to blink, help, in Morse code with their eyes while their mouth says everything is fine. Of course, I heard myself say, my voice sounding weirdly calm considering my internal monologue was currently screaming at a frequency only dogs could hear. I'd be happy to. Happy. What a word. What a complete and utter lie wrapped up in 2 syllables. Inside my head, I was already drafting my escape plan. Maybe I could fake food poisoning, or a sudden allergy to turkey that mysteriously developed overnight. Perhaps I could stage my own kidnapping. Surely that was less traumatic than peeling enough potatoes to feed what was essentially a small militia. I wondered if there was still time to join the witness protection program or fake my own death and start a new life in Belize where nobody knew what a rustic pear galette was. Gloria was still talking, something about napkin folding techniques and how the table's centerpiece needed to be elegant but not pretentious, which was rich coming from a woman who once corrected someone's grammar at a funeral. Clara was nodding along enthusiastically, probably already planning her Instagram photo shoot with captions like, "Blessed to have such an amazing husband," and family traditions, conveniently leaving out the part where I'd be functioning on 2 hours of sleep and sustained entirely by spite and coffee. I looked at both of them standing in my kitchen, their kitchen now, apparently, and felt the weight of what they were really asking. This wasn't about Thanksgiving dinner. This was about unpaid manual labor disguised as family obligation, served with a side of guilt and garnished with passive-aggressive comments. These 32 rich relatives who were coming didn't just want food, they wanted a show, a performance, something they could judge and compare to last year, while simultaneously acting like I should be grateful for the opportunity to serve them. Because nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, says holiday spirit, quite like being voluntold to cook for an army of people who think seasoning is something poor people do, and that saying thank you is optional when dealing with family. Gloria smiled at me one more time, patted my cheek like I was a golden retriever who'd just learned a new trick, and click-clacked her way back toward the door, her perfume lingering long after she left like a warning or a threat. I stared at that list for a solid minute after they both left, and I realized with stunning clarity that I had 2 choices. I could spend the next week slowly losing my mind while preparing a feast for people who wouldn't appreciate it, or I could do something crazy. Spoiler alert, I chose crazy. But that's a story for another chapter. That evening, I found myself standing in our living room experiencing what I can only describe as an out-of-body moment, watching my life spiral into a Norman Rockwell painting directed by someone who clearly hated me. Clara was curled up on our couch with her laptop, bathed in the soft glow of Pinterest's infinite scroll of domestic perfection, making these little excited gasps every time she found a new table setting that looked like it required an engineering degree and the patience of a Buddhist monk to recreate. Meanwhile, I was staring at the turkey I'd just wrestled out of our secondary freezer in the garage, and I'm using the word turkey generously here because this thing was less poultry and more prehistoric bird that probably had its own zip code when it was alive. The turkey sat on our kitchen counter like an accusation, still frozen solid despite the packaging's cheerful promises about easy thawing. This wasn't a turkey. This was a compact car made of meat. I've hosted smaller weddings, organized less complicated corporate events, and I'm pretty sure I once catered a bar mitzvah that required less planning than whatever culinary nightmare I was about to embark on. The bird was so massive that I briefly wondered if it had been genetically modified or if somewhere out there was a farm breeding turkeys with growth hormones that would make a bodybuilder jealous. "Honey," I said, trying to keep my voice level and rational, like a hostage negotiator trying to talk someone off a ledge. "Maybe we can order some of the sides. You know, take some of the pressure off. There's that great Italian place that does catering, or we could hit up Whole Foods and grab some prepared. Clara looked up from her screen with the kind of expression you'd expect if I'd just suggested we sacrifice a goat in the living room or convert to a religion that worships kitchen appliances. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth formed a perfect little O of horror, and for a second I thought she might actually faint. "Order sides," she repeated, like I'd spoken in ancient Sumerian. "For Thanksgiving? Marcus, this is supposed to be homemade. It's tradition. It's what families do. Right. Tradition. That magical word that gets trotted out whenever someone wants you to do something unreasonable but doesn't want to admit it's unreasonable. Tradition is just peer pressure from dead people, but apparently pointing that out would make me the bad guy here. I bit back about 17 different responses, all of which would have ended with me sleeping on the couch, or worse, being volunteered for Christmas dinner too. "Just thinking out loud," I said, retreating into the kitchen before I could say something that would get me in actual trouble. I pulled out my phone to look at Gloria's list again, hoping maybe I'd hallucinated the worst parts, or that some of the items would have magically disappeared. No such luck. If anything, looking at it again made it worse because now I could actually process the sheer insanity of what was expected. That's when Gloria's first text came through. It was 7:47 p.m., barely 3 hours since she'd left my house, and already she was back with helpful reminders. The text was accompanied by a YouTube link about napkin folding techniques, specifically how to create swan shapes that would add elegance to the table presentation. I watched 30 seconds of the video, some woman with an unsettling amount of enthusiasm explaining 17 steps to turn a piece of fabric into a bird, before I had to put my phone down and take several deep breaths. By 8:15, Gloria had sent 4 more texts. One was about the proper way to brine a turkey. Apparently I was supposed to have started this yesterday. Whoops. Another was a reminder that Aunt Meredith's boyfriend was vegetarian, so I'd need to prepare a separate main course, because obviously cooking for 32 people wasn't enough of a challenge. The third text was a link to an article about common Thanksgiving mistakes that ruin dinner, which felt personal. The fourth was just a photo of a perfectly set Thanksgiving table from what looked like a magazine spread, with the caption, "This is the standard we're aiming for." The standard we're aiming for. Not, "I'm aiming for," or "Wouldn't this be nice?" No, we. As if Gloria was going to be anywhere near my kitchen at 4 in the morning when I was elbow deep in turkey cavities and questioning every life choice that led me to this moment. I put my phone face down on the counter and pulled out the calculator app, because I'd reached the point where I needed cold, hard math to confirm what my gut already knew. I was completely screwed. I started calculating how many hours it would take to peel enough potatoes to feed 32 people. The answer, after factoring in the 3 different potato dishes Gloria had demanded, was approximately forever. Maybe longer. I need to peel somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 pounds of potatoes, and that wasn't counting the inevitable ones I'd have to throw out because I'd cut too deep or discovered they'd gone bad or simply lost the will to continue. Then there were the green beans. Do you know how long it takes to trim 2 pounds of fresh green beans by hand? Because I didn't, but I was about to find out, and I had a feeling the answer was going to make me want to weep. And the pies. Oh God, the pies. 3 different types, all with homemade crusts because apparently store-bought pie crust was taking the easy way out, according to Gloria's text number 6, which had just buzzed through. Clara called out from the living room, her voice bright with excitement. "Babe, come look at this table runner I found. It's perfect. It's got little embroidered turkeys and fall leaves, and it's only $140. $140 for a piece of fabric that would have cranberry sauce spilled on it within minutes of dinner starting." I closed my eyes and counted to 10, then 20, then gave up on counting and just stood there feeling my soul slowly deflate like a sad balloon at a kid's party 3 days after the actual birthday. My phone buzzed again. Text number 7 from Gloria. "Don't forget the turkey needs to rest for at least 30 minutes after cooking. Plan accordingly." As if I wasn't already planning every minute of my life for the next 72 hours like I was orchestrating a military operation or coordinating a moon landing. I opened the fridge to see what we already had and immediately regretted it. The turkey was going to take up every available inch of space once it thawed, which meant I'd need to reorganize everything, probably purge half the contents, and explain to Clara why her collection of half-empty condiment bottles and mysterious Tupperware containers from 3 weeks ago needed to go. That was going to be a fun conversation, right up there with maybe we should order sides, in terms of suggestions that would go over like a lead balloon. Marcus. Clara's voice again, still cheerful, still oblivious to my descent into madness. Can you come here for a sec? I walked back into the living room, where she had her laptop turned toward me, showing me a split-screen comparison of two nearly identical table centerpieces. Which one do you like better? The one with the white pumpkins or the orange ones? I'm thinking the white is more elegant, but the orange is more traditional, and I just can't decide. They looked exactly the same to me, but I knew better than to say that. The white ones, I said, because white seemed safer, more neutral, less likely to lead to a 45-minute discussion about color theory and seasonal aesthetics. Clara beamed like I'd just solved world peace. That's what I was thinking. See, this is why we're perfect together. We have the same taste. Sure, same taste. That's definitely why I'd chosen the white pumpkins and not, because I was mentally calculating whether I had time to sleep at all between now and Thursday, or if I should just accept my fate as a zombie chef powered entirely by caffeine and existential dread. I trudged upstairs around 11, leaving Clara still scrolling through Pinterest, probably comparing napkin ring options or researching the optimal angle for overhead food photography. I climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, my mind racing through mental checklists and prep schedules and increasingly elaborate fantasies about natural disasters that would cancel Thanksgiving. Please, I whispered to the ceiling, to God, to the universe, to whatever cosmic force might be listening. Please let the oven explode before dawn. Just a small explosion. Nothing that would hurt anyone. Just enough to make cooking impossible. Is that too much to ask? The ceiling, predictably, didn't answer. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, Gloria's text number 9, probably reminding me about something else I was going to mess up. I didn't even look at it. I just closed my eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to be happy, to have hobbies, to exist in a world where Thanksgiving was just a nice day off work and not a multi-day endurance test of my sanity and marriage. No such luck on that explosion, by the way. The oven worked perfectly, because of course it did. The universe has a terrible sense of humor like that. The alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., which is an absolutely unholy time to be conscious unless you're a farmer, a baker, or someone who's made a series of regrettable life decisions that led to marrying into a family that thinks Thanksgiving is a competitive sport. I slapped the snooze button so hard I'm surprised my phone survived, but the damage was done. I was awake, and the reality of what I had to do today came flooding back like a nightmare you can't shake off even after you've opened your eyes. By 6 in the morning, I was standing in the parking lot of Savamart, which is what passes for a supermarket in our suburban hellscape, watching the automatic doors slide open with all the enthusiasm of a convicted man walking toward the electric chair. The store had that weird early morning energy where everything felt slightly off, like I'd entered a parallel dimension where the normal rules of society didn't quite apply. There were exactly 4 other people in the entire place. An elderly man buying a single banana, a woman in pajama pants who looked like she was shopping in her sleep, a college kid still drunk from last night grabbing Gatorade and aspirin, and me, the idiot about to buy enough food to supply a small nation. I grabbed a shopping cart from the lineup near the entrance, and naturally, because the universe has a sixth sense of humor and clearly has it out for me, I got the one cart in the entire store with a broken wheel. You know the type. The one that doesn't roll so much as it lurches violently to the left like it's trying to escape, making this god-awful squeaking sound that echoed through the empty aisles like a dying seagull. I tried swapping it out for another cart, but apparently at 6 in the morning, all the good carts are taken by the smart people who got here early, leaving only the island of misfit shopping carts for losers like me. So there I was, wrestling this 3-wheeled disaster through the produce section, trying to load it up with enough vegetables to feed an army while simultaneously fighting to keep the cart moving in a straight line. I grabbed celery, onions, carrots, fresh herbs that cost more per ounce than gold, and those fancy shallots that Gloria had specifically requested because apparently regular onions are for peasants. Every time I put something in the cart, it would lurch forward or sideways, nearly taking out a display of organic apples that were marked up to prices that should have required a loan application. The turkey section was its own special circle of hell. I'm talking industrial freezers the size of coffins, stacked with birds of every conceivable size. I needed the biggest one they had. Actually, I needed two of the biggest ones they had, plus a smaller one for backup because Gloria's list had specified planned for hearty appetites and leftovers. I wrestled these frozen monuments to excess into my cart, and I swear the cart actually groaned under the weight, the broken wheel now squeaking even louder in protest. A stock clerk walked by, did a double take at my cart, and said, "Dang man, you hosting a football team or something? Just Thanksgiving dinner." I replied, my voice flat with the resignation of someone who'd already accepted their fate. He let out a low whistle and kept walking, probably going back to tell his coworkers about the crazy dude buying enough turkey to feed a battalion. I didn't even care. I was beyond shame at this point. Shame requires energy, and I needed to conserve every ounce I had for the actual cooking marathon that was looming in my near future. Next came the potatoes. 25 pounds of them, distributed across 3 different varieties because God forbid we just make one type of potato like normal people. I grabbed russets for mashing, Yukon Golds for roasting, and fingerlings for the fancy gratin that was definitely going to make me question my will to live. The bags were heavy enough that loading them into the cart felt like a CrossFit workout I definitely didn't sign up for. Then the canned goods aisle, where I loaded up on chicken broth, cream of mushroom soup, pumpkin puree, evaporated milk, and various other ingredients that individually seemed reasonable, but collectively looked like I was prepping for either Thanksgiving or the apocalypse. Honestly, at this point, there wasn't much difference. My cart was now so full and so heavy that steering it required the kind of upper body strength usually reserved for professional arm wrestlers. I rounded the corner into the dairy section and nearly collided with my neighbor Tom, who was reaching for a gallon of milk while wearing sweatpants and a ratty college hoodie that had definitely seen better days. Tom took one look at my overflowing cart, which at this point resembled a mobile food mountain more than actual groceries, and his eyes went wide. "Bro," he said, and I could hear the genuine concern in his voice. "Are you feeding the Marines? What is happening here?" I looked down at my cart, seeing it through his eyes for the first time. The multiple turkeys stacked like cordwood, mountains of vegetables, enough dairy products to stock a small restaurant, bags of flour and sugar, pie ingredients, and we hadn't even gotten to the miscellaneous items on Gloria's list yet. "Just my in-laws," I said, managing a weak smile. "Same energy, fewer medals." Tom laughed, but it was that uncomfortable laugh people do when they're not sure if you're joking or having a breakdown. "Man, that's rough. You need help?" "I'm not doing anything today except watching TV and avoiding responsibilities." For a brief, shining moment, I considered it. I imagined Tom coming over, the two of us tag-teaming this culinary nightmare, turning it into some kind of buddy comedy where we'd laugh about it later over beers. But then I remembered Gloria's exacting standards, Clara's expectations, and the fact that dragging my neighbor into this mess would probably violate some kind of Geneva Convention about cruel and unusual punishment. "I appreciate it, man, but I think this is something I gotta do solo," I said. Like a vision quest, except instead of finding myself, I'm finding out exactly how much I can hate Thanksgiving. Tom clapped me on the shoulder with genuine sympathy. "Good luck, dude. May the force be with you." Or whatever. "You're gonna need it." He grabbed his single gallon of milk and walked away, probably thanking whatever gods he believed in that he wasn't in my shoes. I continued my odyssey through the store, hitting every aisle on Gloria's meticulously detailed list. Baking supplies, spices, more butter than any human should reasonably need, cream cheese, sour cream, heavy cream. Apparently this Thanksgiving was going to be sponsored by the dairy industry. I grabbed green beans, Brussels sprouts, cranberries, bread for stuffing, and one of those pre-made pie crusts that I was going to hide in the back of the cart and pretend I made from scratch because I wasn't a complete masochist. By the time I made it to checkout, my cart looked like one of those extreme couponing hauls you see on TLC, except without the savings and with significantly more existential dread. The checkout line was empty because, again, normal people aren't grocery shopping at 6:30 in the morning. So I rolled my squeaking cart of doom up to register 3, where a cashier named Brenda, according to her name tag, took one look at my haul, and her face went through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, confusion, pity, and finally settling on a kind of weary acceptance. "Big plans?" she asked, starting to scan items with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd been doing this job way too long to be surprised by anything. "Thanksgiving," I said, Cooking for 32 people. 32. Brenda stopped scanning for a moment to look at me with what I can only describe as genuine concern. Honey, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone? I'm fine. I lied, watching the total on the register climb higher and higher with each beep. This is fine. Everything is fine. Everything was not fine. The total kept climbing, past 200, past 500, past 1,000, and I watched my bank account mentally crying in the corner. When Brenda finally announced the grand total of $1,247.83, I actually felt lightheaded. That was my car payment. That was a mortgage payment. That was a small vacation, a new TV, or approximately a million other things I'd rather spend that money on than ingredients for a meal that would be consumed in 20 minutes by people who probably wouldn't even say thank you. I handed over my credit card with shaking hands, and Brenda gave me these pity eyes that said, I've seen some things in my life, but this might be the saddest. Even the card reader seemed judgmental, taking an extra long time to process the transaction like it was trying to give me one last chance to back out, to come to my senses, to remember that I was a human being with rights and dignity. The receipt printed out in 3 separate sheets, longer than most CVS receipts, a comprehensive documentation of my descent into madness. I loaded everything into my car, which required Tetris-level spatial reasoning to make it all fit, and drove home with my trunk so full of groceries that my car was riding low like I was smuggling something illegal across state lines. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my back hurt from all the lifting, my wallet was crying itself to sleep, and my soul had officially requested early retirement, possibly with disability benefits. I sat in my car for a solid minute, staring at my house, knowing that inside waited even more work, more stress, and a wife who was probably already planning the Instagram caption for food that didn't exist yet. This was fine. Everything was fine. I'd only lost $1,000 and several years off my life expectancy. What could possibly go wrong from here? Spoiler alert, literally everything. Wednesday afternoon rolled around with all the inevitability of a freight train heading toward a car stalled on the tracks, and I found myself standing in my kitchen surrounded by more ingredients than a professional cooking show. Except nobody was going to edit out my mistakes or give me a cheerful soundtrack to make this experience seem fun. The counter space had disappeared entirely under bags of groceries. The turkeys were thawing in a bathtub situation I'd rather not discuss. And I had approximately 36 hours to transform this chaos into a meal that would satisfy Gloria's impossibly high standards without poisoning anyone or having a complete mental breakdown. The odds were not in my favor. Clara had positioned herself at the kitchen table with her laptop, a glass of wine that was way too generous for 3 in the afternoon, and what she called her supervisory role. Now, I'm not a linguist or anything, but I'm pretty sure supervisory implies some level of actual work or contribution. But in Clara's world, it apparently meant sitting there looking pretty while scrolling through her phone and occasionally glancing up to offer commentary that ranged from unhelpful to actively detrimental to my sanity. "How's it going, honey?" she asked, not looking up from what appeared to be an Instagram story about someone's artisanal cheese board. She was wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater, the universal uniform of women who have no intention of doing anything productive but want to look cute while not doing it. "Great," I said through gritted teeth, currently engaged in a wrestling match with a butternut squash that had the density of a bowling ball and approximately the same level of cooperation. I was trying to peel this orange monster without losing a finger, which was harder than it sounds because squash are naturally slippery, and the peeler I was using had clearly been designed by someone who hated humanity. Just peachy, living the dream. I'd been at this for 3 hours already, and I'd barely made a dent in Gloria's list. The kitchen looked like a bomb had gone off in a farmer's market. Vegetable peelings covered every surface. I'd already gone through 2 dish towels, and there was this sticky film on everything that I couldn't identify but suspected was some combination of butter, flour, and my will to live slowly evaporating into the air. "You're so good at this," Clara said, finally looking up with a smile that would have been endearing if I wasn't currently sweating through my 3rd shirt of the day. "I could never do what you're doing. It's like you were born to cook." "Right, born to cook. Because nothing screams natural talent like being voluntold to prepare a feast for 3 dozen people with approximately 0 training beyond what I'd picked up from YouTube videos and sheer desperation. I wanted to point out that maybe, just maybe, she could never do what I was doing because she'd never actually tried, but that seemed like the kind of observation that would lead to a fight, and I needed to conserve my energy for the actual cooking, not for defending my position that kitchen duties shouldn't automatically fall to one person just because they demonstrated basic competence once. "Thanks, babe," I said instead, channeling every ounce of passive aggression I could muster into 2 words while simultaneously trying to dice an onion without crying. The onion was winning. She took another sip of her wine, her second glass, I noticed, while I was over here stone-cold sober and probably going to stay that way until this nightmare was over, because the last thing I needed was to accidentally set something on fire or confuse salt with sugar while intoxicated. "Do you need any help?" Clara asked, and I recognized this question for what it was, a formality, a social nicety, the kind of thing you ask when you absolutely don't want the answer to be yes. "Could you start on the cranberry sauce?" I suggested, because cranberry sauce is literally one of the easiest things on the entire menu. You dump a bag of cranberries in a pot with sugar and orange juice, heat it up, and boom, done. A trained monkey could make cranberry sauce. A particularly motivated hamster could probably figure it out. Clara wrinkled her nose like I'd asked her to perform surgery. "Oh, honey, you know I'm terrible in the kitchen. I'd probably mess it up, and then we'd have to start over, and that would just make more work for you." She said this with such conviction, like she'd really thought through the logic, like her being deliberately incompetent was somehow doing me a favor. I stared at the cranberries sitting on the counter, then back at Clara, then at the 6 burners I currently had going simultaneously, each one demanding attention like needy children. "Right," I said. "Wouldn't want to create more work." The thing is, I knew what was really happening here. This was learned helplessness in action, the same routine we'd been dancing around for years. Clara had figured out early in our relationship that if she claimed to be bad at cooking and made a few deliberately terrible attempts, I'd eventually just take over entirely. And like an idiot, I'd fallen for it, because it seemed easier to just do it myself than to deal with the drama of teaching someone who didn't want to learn. By 6 o'clock, I had all 6 burners going at once. The oven was running at 2 different temperatures because I'd rigged up a situation with aluminum foil dividers that probably violated several fire codes, and I was sweating so profusely that I looked like I'd just finished a marathon. I was simultaneously monitoring a pot of stock that needed to simmer for another hour, stirring a roux that would become gravy base, blanching green beans in boiling water, roasting vegetables that needed to be turned every 15 minutes, and trying to prepare a test batch of stuffing to make sure I had the seasoning right. Clara had moved on to taking selfies with her wine glass, positioning herself at different angles to capture the casual cooking ambience of our kitchen, which apparently translated to her looking effortlessly beautiful while I resembled a disaster victim in the background. "This is so going on Instagram," she announced. "Thanksgiving prep mode. Blessed to have such an amazing husband who does all this." Amazing husband. Code for the guy I've successfully manipulated into doing all the work while I take credit for it on social media. I imagine the comments. "You're so lucky," and "relationship goals," and "where did you find him?" While the reality was me having a small breakdown over whether I'd added enough sage to the stuffing. That's when my phone rang with Gloria's personalized ringtone, which I'd set to the theme from Jaws because it seemed appropriate. I looked at the screen, considered not answering, then remembered that ignoring Gloria was like ignoring a tornado warning. You could do it, but you'd definitely regret it later. "Hi, Gloria," I said, tucking the phone between my ear and shoulder while simultaneously stirring 3 different pots. "Marcus, darling, I have a teensy tiny little problem," she said, and I knew immediately that teensy tiny in Gloria speak meant catastrophic disaster that I'm about to make your problem. "I just found out that Melissa's son, you remember little Timothy, such a precious child. Well, it turns out he's developed some food allergies." Little Timothy was 17 years old, 6'2", and about as precious as a rattlesnake, but I kept that observation to myself. "Okay," I said slowly, already feeling the dread pooling in my stomach. "What's he allergic to?" "Oh, just a few things," Gloria said breezily, like she was discussing the weather. "Gluten, dairy, nuts, and shellfish. So obviously the menu will need some adjustments." I looked at the counter, at the 12 hours of prep work I'd already done, at the stuffing that was literally made of bread, at the cream-based dishes, at the pecan pie I'd already assembled. "Gloria," I said, my voice remarkably calm considering I was internally screaming. "You're telling me this now? After I've already started cooking?" "Well, Melissa only just texted me, darling. She's very apologetic about it." Gloria's tone suggested that Melissa's apology somehow made this acceptable, like saying sorry made up for completely appending an entire menu with less than 48 hours notice. "So what exactly do you expect me to do?" I asked, watching Clara look up from her phone with mild interest, like she was watching a reality show instead of witnessing her husband's sanity slowly disintegrating. "Just redo the dishes that have those ingredients," Gloria said, as if this was the most reasonable request in the world. "Make alternative versions. Surely that's not too difficult for someone with your skills." "Sure. Just redo half the menu. No problem. Let me just invent time travel real quick. Or maybe I could clone myself. Or perhaps I could develop the ability to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously so I could cook enough food for both the regular menu and the alternative allergy-friendly menu in the same amount of time." "Gloria," I started, but she cut me off. "I knew I could count on you, Marcus. You're such a dear. Timothy will be so grateful. Must run. I have a hair appointment. Ta-da." And she hung up before I could formulate a response that wouldn't get me immediately disowned. I stood there holding the phone, staring at it like it might offer some explanation or apology for what had just happened. Clara was looking at me with those big, sympathetic eyes that meant she understood this was bad, but had absolutely no intention of helping solve the problem. "That sounded stressful," she offered, which was the understatement of the century. I carefully set my phone down on the counter, turned off all 6 burners because I needed a moment before I accidentally started a grease fire out of pure rage, and took several deep breaths. I counted to 10, then 20, then gave up on counting because no amount of numbers was going to make this situation less insane. "Yeah," I finally said, my voice flat. "Super stressful. But don't worry, I'll just redo half the menu because apparently that's totally reasonable and not at all the kind of thing that makes people fake their own deaths and flee to Mexico." Clara laughed like I was joking, went back to her phone, and refilled her wine glass. I looked at the ceiling, at the pots and pans scattered across every surface, at the mountain of work I'd already done and the even bigger mountain of work still ahead of me, and I realized something with stunning clarity. I was done. Not done cooking. I'd see this through because I'm apparently a glutton for punishment, but done with this whole ridiculous situation. I just didn't know it yet. But the seed was planted, growing in the back of my mind like a beautiful, rebellious weed. And that seed was whispering one simple question: what if I just didn't? There's something surreal about standing in your kitchen at 2:59 in the morning, staring down 3 massive turkeys that are looking back at you like hostages waiting for their fate to be decided, while the rest of the civilized world is asleep and dreaming about things that don't involve compound butter or the correct internal temperature for poultry. The house was dark except for the dim light over the stove, creating these weird shadows that made everything feel like a scene from a horror movie where the killer is stress and the weapon is unreasonable family expectations. My phone alarm was set to go off at 4 a.m., exactly 60 minutes from now, signaling the start of what was supposed to be my 16-hour descent into culinary hell. But here's the thing about rock bottom. Sometimes when you hit it, you don't just lie there and accept your fate. Sometimes you bounce. And sometimes, if you're lucky and just crazy enough, you bounce all the way to Hawaii. I'd booked the flight 3 hours ago, somewhere around midnight when I'd been lying in bed unable to sleep, listening to Clara's peaceful breathing next to me and feeling this crushing weight on my chest that had nothing to do with the pizza I'd stress-eaten for dinner. I'd been scrolling through my phone, probably looking at memes or desperately seeking any distraction from tomorrow's impending doom, when an advertisement popped up, one of those targeted ads that knows way too much about your life. Last-minute flights to Honolulu. Escape winter. Escape everything. Escape everything. Those 2 words hit me like a revelation, like divine intervention, like that moment in every movie where the protagonist suddenly sees the solution that's been there all along. I sat up in bed, careful not to wake Clara, and started Googling flights with the manic energy of someone who'd just discovered fire. There was a red-eye leaving at 4:15 a.m., the exact same time I was supposed to be elbow-deep in turkey preparation. The universe was sending me a sign, and for once in my life, I decided to actually listen. The ticket was expensive, painfully expensive, the kind of expensive that would normally make me close the browser and pretend I'd never seen it. But then I thought about the $1,247.83 I'd spent at the grocery store, the countless hours of unpaid labor, the complete lack of appreciation or help, and suddenly that plane ticket seemed like the best investment I'd ever make. I pulled out my credit card, the same one that was still recovering from the grocery store massacre, and I bought that ticket with the satisfaction of someone taking control of their own life for the first time in way too long. Now, standing in my kitchen with my packed suitcase hidden in the garage and my passport tucked in my jacket pocket, I felt this weird mixture of terror and exhilaration. This was really happening. I was really doing this. In approximately 15 minutes, I was going to walk out of this house and not come back until I was good and ready, and there wasn't a damn thing Gloria or Clara or any of those 32 ungrateful relatives could do about it. I looked at those turkeys one more time, sitting on the counter in their disposable aluminum roasting pans like they were judging me for my choices. "Sorry, guys," I whispered to them, which is probably a sign I'd been awake too long and was losing my grip on reality. "You're on your own. I suggest you make a run for it while you still can." The note was already written, composed during a burst of inspiration around 1:30 a.m. when I should have been sleeping, but was instead channeling all my passive-aggressive energy into 3 sentences that would change everything. I'd rewritten it 4 times, trying to get the tone just right. Not too angry, not too apologetic, just the perfect amount of, "I'm done with this nonsense, and I'm not sorry." The final version was sitting on the counter, weighted down with a salt shaker so it wouldn't blow away when Clara inevitably stormed through here in a panic. I picked it up, read it one more time in the dim light. "Gloria, Clara, all the groceries are in the fridge. The turkeys are thawed and ready to cook. You're welcome. I'm sure between the 2 of you and 30 other relatives, someone can figure out how to work an oven. YouTube has excellent tutorials. Love, Marcus. P.S. I'll be back when I'm back." It was perfect. Polite enough that I couldn't be accused of being a complete jerk, but clear enough that the message was unmistakable. I was out, and they were on their own. I set it back down on the counter, right where Clara would see it when she came downstairs expecting to smell roasting turkey, and instead found my letter of independence. I did a final sweep of the house, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything critical. Passport, check. Wallet, check. Phone and charger, check. Sunscreen that I'd panic bought from Amazon at 2 in the morning, check. My suitcase had been packed for hours, filled with shorts, t-shirts, and absolutely nothing that Gloria would consider appropriate attire. I was going to spend the next few days wearing clothes that would give my mother-in-law heart palpitations, and I couldn't wait. The clock on the microwave read 3:03 a.m. time to go. I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door, picked up my suitcase from where I'd stashed it in the garage, and took one last look at my kitchen, at the industrial-sized containers of chicken broth, the mountains of vegetables that would probably go bad before anyone figured out what to do with them, the fancy ingredients that Gloria had insisted were absolutely essential. All of it sitting there, a monument to wasted effort and misplaced expectations. Good luck with all that, I said to the empty room, and I meant it. They were going to need it. I closed the door behind me as quietly as possible, loaded my suitcase into my car, and sat in the driver's seat for just a moment, my hands on the steering wheel, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. This was crazy. This was irresponsible. This was possibly the most impulsive thing I'd ever done in my entire carefully planned, risk-averse life. And it felt absolutely incredible. The drive to the airport was surreal. Empty highways at 3 in the morning, street lights creating pools of orange light in the darkness, and me with this grin on my face that probably made me look like a lunatic, but I didn't care. I turned the radio up loud, some classic rock station playing Journey's "Don't Stop Believin'," and I sang along at the top of my lungs because why not? I was free. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, maybe months, I felt like I could actually breathe. Airport parking at 3:30 in the morning is a weird experience. There's barely anyone around, just a few other desperate souls catching early flights, and the whole place has this liminal quality like you've stepped outside of normal time. I grabbed my suitcase, locked the car, and walked toward the terminal with the confidence of someone who'd finally figured out that you can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Check-in was smooth, almost suspiciously smooth, like the universe was rewarding me for finally growing a spine. The TSA agent looked at my ticket, looked at me, and raised an eyebrow. Hawaii, huh? Lucky you. You have no idea, I said, and I meant it more than he could possibly understand. I made it through security with 20 minutes to spare before boarding. I found my gate, settled into one of those uncomfortable airport chairs that seemed designed specifically to make you appreciate airplane seats by comparison, and pulled out my phone. I had it on silent, but I could see the notifications starting to pile up already. My alarm had gone off at 4. The alarm I'd set days ago when I was still naive enough to think I was actually going to cook this meal. Clara had probably heard it, rolled over, wondered why I wasn't in bed, and then gone back to sleep assuming I'd already started cooking. She was in for a surprise. By the time boarding started, I had 17 missed calls and 23 text messages. I didn't read them. I didn't need to. I could imagine exactly what they said. Confusion, then panic, then anger, then probably some combination of all three mixed with guilt-tripping and demands that I come home immediately. But here's the thing about demands. They only work if you're around to hear them. I boarded the plane, found my seat, middle row, middle seat, but I didn't even care, and settled in with the satisfaction of someone who just pulled off the greatest escape since Steve McQueen jumped that fence on a motorcycle. The flight attendant came by to check that my seatbelt was fastened, and I gave her the biggest, most genuine smile I'd managed in weeks. As the plane taxied down the runway, I looked out the window at the city lights getting smaller below us, and I thought about what was happening back at my house right about now. Clara would have found the note. She would have screamed my name into the empty house, her voice echoing off the walls. She would have called Gloria in a panic, and Gloria would have shown up in her Mercedes wearing her pearls and her fury like matching accessories. And those turkeys, those 3 massive, uncooked turkeys, would just be sitting there on the counter, a monument to my rebellion and their complete inability to take care of themselves for even one meal. The plane lifted off, and I felt this weight lift off my shoulders with it. I ordered a coffee from the flight attendant. Terrible airplane coffee that tasted like it had been brewed sometime during the Reagan administration, and I raised my cup in a silent toast to myself, to freedom, to finally choosing my own sanity over everyone else's expectations. When the sunrise started painting the clouds outside my window in shades of pink and orange, I took out my phone one last time before I'd turn it off for real. I opened up the camera, snapped a selfie of me grinning like an idiot with the sunrise behind me, and typed out one message to the family group chat that Gloria had created specifically for Thanksgiving coordination. Thanksgiving in paradise. Tell Gloria the turkey's her problem now. Airplane palm tree. Then I turned off my phone, reclined my seat as far as it would go in economy, and closed my eyes. For the first time in what felt like forever, I fell asleep with a smile on my face, dreaming not of turkeys and timers, but of beaches and freedom and the revolutionary concept of actually enjoying a holiday for once. Best stuffing I never made. Now, I wasn't there to witness what happened next, obviously, because I was somewhere over the Pacific Ocean enjoying the world's worst airplane coffee and the world's best life decision. But I heard about it later from multiple sources, each one more gleeful than the last to fill me in on the absolute chaos that erupted back home. Apparently, Carmen, Clara's sister who'd always been the cool one in the family, recorded half of it on her phone because she recognized comedy gold when she saw it. The group chat I'd muted became a documentary of disaster, and honestly, hearing about it secondhand while sitting on a beach drinking something with a tiny umbrella in it made the whole experience even better. According to Carmen's play-by-play, Clara woke up around 6:30 a.m., which was already later than she should have if she was expecting me to have everything under control. She'd apparently stretched, rolled over, noticed my side of the bed was empty, and assumed I was downstairs being the dutiful husband chef she'd taken for granted. She'd probably smiled to herself, already composing the Instagram caption in her head about how blessed she was to have a man who'd wake up at 4 in the morning to cook for her family. The delusion was strong with that one. She'd shuffled downstairs in her pajamas, the expensive silk ones she'd bought specifically for Thanksgiving morning photos, expecting to be hit with the smell of roasting turkey, fresh coffee, and whatever other magical aromas are supposed to fill a house during holiday cooking. Instead, she was hit with silence, the cold reality of an empty kitchen, and my notes sitting there on the counter like a breakup letter, which in a way, I guess it was. Carmen said Clara just stood there for a full 30 seconds, staring at the note like it was written in ancient hieroglyphics, her brain refusing to process what her eyes were clearly seeing. She read it once, twice, 3 times, as if maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something that made more sense, something that didn't mean what it obviously meant. Then, according to Carmen, who'd arrived early to help, which really meant gossip and drink coffee, Clara let out a scream that could have shattered glass. Marquis. The sound apparently echoed through the entire house, through the neighborhood, possibly reaching low Earth orbit. She screamed my name like I was going to materialize out of thin air and tell her this was all some elaborate prank, that the cameras were going to come out, and we'd all have a good laugh about it. She ran through the house checking every room, the bedroom, the bathroom, the garage, looking for me like I might be hiding behind a door waiting to jump out and yell surprise. When the reality finally sank in that I was actually, genuinely gone, Clara did what any self-respecting woman in crisis does. She called her mother. At 6:47 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning, Gloria's phone rang with the kind of news that would make any controlling mother-in-law's blood pressure spike to dangerous levels. He's gone. Clara had shrieked into the phone, her voice reaching frequencies that probably disturbed wildlife. Marcus is gone. He left a note. There's no food. The turkeys are just sitting here. Mom, what are we going to do? Gloria, from what I heard, went through her own stages of grief in rapid succession. Denial. What do you mean he's gone? Check the garage. Anger. That ungrateful little. Bargaining. Call him right now and tell him we'll order some sides. Depression. A moment of silence as the reality hit, and finally landing on her default setting. Fury mixed with damage control. She told Clara she'd be there in 20 minutes, hung up, and apparently violated several traffic laws getting to our house in her Mercedes, because nothing motivates Gloria quite like a crisis that makes her look bad in front of her social circle. She arrived at 7:03 a.m., a full 12 minutes faster than Google Maps said was possible, wearing a designer pantsuit, full makeup, and her pearls, because apparently Gloria's response to a family emergency is to dress like she's attending a board meeting. She stormed into the house with the energy of a 5-star general surveying a battlefield, took one look at the uncooked turkeys, the note, and Clara's tear-streaked face, and said with the kind of cold fury that could freeze hell, "He what?" But there was no time for a proper meltdown, because relatives started arriving at 8:30 a.m., rolling up in their luxury SUVs and European sedans, dressed in their Thanksgiving finest, expecting to be greeted with mimosas and appetizers and the warm, inviting smell of a feast being prepared by yours truly. Instead, they walked into what Carmen later described as a war room where the war was already lost. Uncle Gary was the first to arrive, bless his heart, walking in with a bottle of wine and his usual oblivious cheerfulness. He took one look at the situation, Gloria pacing like a caged tiger, Clara on the verge of a breakdown, and the very obviously uncooked turkeys sitting there like evidence at a crime scene, and said, "So, are we ordering pizza, or what?" The look Gloria gave him could have killed a lesser man. "We are not ordering pizza, Gary. This is Thanksgiving. We have standards." "Yeah, but do we have food?" Gary countered, because Uncle Gary had always been my favorite for a reason. He didn't care about impressing anyone or maintaining some ridiculous standard of perfection. He just wanted to eat and watch football, which honestly seemed like the most reasonable approach to Thanksgiving I'd ever heard. More relatives kept arriving in waves. Aunt Meredith with her vegetarian boyfriend who nobody liked. Cousin Jennifer with her 3 kids who immediately started asking where the food was. Clara's grandmother who was confused about why there weren't any appetizers. And about 24 other people I'd spent weeks planning to feed. The house filled up with voices, questions, confusion, and a growing sense of panic as people started realizing that not only was there no food ready, there wasn't going to be any food ready for hours, if at all. Carmen told me that Gloria had tried to take charge, delegating tasks like a cruise ship captain trying to keep the Titanic afloat after it hit the iceberg. She'd thrust the turkey at Aunt Patricia and said, "You cook this one." Patricia had looked at the 20-pound bird like Gloria had handed her a live grenade. I don't know how. I've never cooked a turkey." "Well, learn." Gloria had snapped, pulling out her phone. "There's YouTube. Figure it out." And that's how Thanksgiving at my house turned into a bizarre cooking show where nobody knew what they were doing and everyone was simultaneously the contestant and the judge. People were frantically Googling things like how to cook a turkey and can you cook a frozen turkey? One of them was apparently still frozen solid. And how long does it take to make mashed potatoes? The kitchen descended into chaos. Too many cooks literally spoiling the broth, plus everything else. Cousin Michael tried to help by offering to deep fry a turkey in the backyard, which sent Gloria into a panic about house fires and property values. Someone burned the green beans because they forgot about them while arguing about the proper oven temperature. The mashed potatoes turned into soup because nobody knew you were supposed to drain the water before mashing. The fancy gratin I'd planned became a Pinterest fail of epic proportions, looking like something you'd find at a crime scene rather than on a dinner table. Uncle Gary, bless him, kept suggesting they just order pizza or Chinese food or literally anything that didn't require this level of incompetence and stress. Each time he suggested it, Gloria would shoot him down with increasing hostility, clinging desperately to the idea that they could salvage this disaster and maintain some semblance of dignity. Spoiler alert, they couldn't. By noon, when the food should have been at least halfway done, they'd managed to get one turkey in the oven. Nobody was sure at what temperature because 3 different people had adjusted it and had created a mountain of dirty dishes that rivaled my prep work from the day before. The house smelled like burnt vegetables and broken dreams. People were getting hangry, the kids were having meltdowns, and someone had accidentally used salt instead of sugar in the pie, which wouldn't be discovered until dessert. Carmen sent me updates throughout the day, each text more hilarious than the last. Aunt Patricia just called the turkey help hotline. Gloria is crying in the bathroom. Someone set off the smoke alarm for the 3rd time. Uncle Gary ordered pizza anyway, and he's my new hero. Dinner, which was supposed to be served at 2 p.m., finally made it to the table at 9:13 p.m., a full 7 hours late. It was less of a feast and more of a buffet showcasing every possible cooking mistake known to humanity. Turkey that was simultaneously dry and undercooked in places, sides that ranged from burnt to inedible, and a general atmosphere of defeat that hung over the table like a storm cloud. Carmen's final text of the night was a photo of the dinner table, which looked like a war zone, with the caption, "This is what happens when you take your chef for granted. Marcus, you're a legend and I salute you." Meanwhile, I was on a beach watching the sunset, drinking something tropical that was definitely more alcohol than juice, and feeling absolutely zero guilt about any of it. I raised my glass toward the ocean, toward home, toward the disaster I'd left behind, and whispered, "You're welcome for the lesson, ladies. Class is now in session." The thing about Hawaii that nobody really prepares you for is how aggressively beautiful it is. Like the entire state is trying way too hard to prove that paradise actually exists and isn't just some made-up concept designed to sell vacation packages and screensavers. I'd landed in Honolulu around 10:30 a.m. local time, which was already mid-afternoon back home, right around when the disaster was probably reaching its peak crescendo. And the moment I stepped off that plane and felt the warm tropical air hit my face, I knew I'd made the right choice. The air smelled like flowers and ocean and freedom, which is a combination that should be bottled and sold as an antidepressant. By noon, I was checked into a hotel that was way nicer than anything I would have normally splurged on. But screw it. I'd just saved myself approximately 16 hours of manual labor and a potential stress-induced heart attack, so I figured I'd earned it. The room had a balcony overlooking the ocean, a king-sized bed that I didn't have to share with anyone's expectations, and most importantly, absolutely zero relatives within a 3,000-mile radius. It was glorious. I changed into shorts, bright tropical print ones that I'd bought at the airport gift shop because I'd packed in such a rush that I'd forgotten half my clothes. And these shorts were objectively ridiculous. We're talking flamingos wearing sunglasses level of ridiculous, the kind of shorts that Gloria would have taken one look at and declared disrespectful to the institution of fashion itself. They were perfect. I paired them with a t-shirt that said Aloha Beaches because I'm apparently 12 years old when left to my own devices, and I headed down to the beach like a man on a mission to forget that responsibility existed. The beach was everything those tourism commercials promised and more. White sand that squeaked under my feet, water so blue it looked fake, and palm trees swaying in the breeze like they were personally welcoming me to paradise. I found a lounge chair under an umbrella, claimed it as my new kingdom, and stretched out with the kind of satisfaction that can only come from knowing you've successfully escaped a nightmare of your own creation. That's when Maria appeared, the waitress from the beach bar who would become my personal hero over the next few days. She walked over with a smile that suggested she'd seen plenty of mainlanders having various types of crises and knew exactly how to handle them. "You look like you need a drink," she said, which was possibly the most perceptive thing anyone had said to me in months. "You have no idea," I replied, and before I could even order, she disappeared and came back 3 minutes later with a coconut. An actual coconut with the top cut off, a straw sticking out, and what I could only assume was enough rum to make me forget my own name. "First one's on the house," Maria said with a wink. "You've got that look." "What look?" I asked, taking the coconut and immediately appreciating the weight of it in my hands, the realness of it, the fact that it represented the complete opposite of everything I'd left behind. "The look of someone who just escaped something," she said, adjusting her visor. "We see it a lot here. Hawaii's basically where people come when they need to remember they're human beings and not just someone's employee, spouse, or servant." I almost cried. I actually felt my eyes getting wet, and I had to take a sip of the coconut drink to cover up the fact that a kind word from a stranger had nearly broken me. The drink was incredible, sweet and strong and tasting like vacation should taste, like every tropical fantasy you've ever had condensed into liquid form. "You're good at your job," I told Maria, and she laughed and went back to the bar, leaving me alone with my coconut and my thoughts and the sound of waves that were way more soothing than any white noise machine had ever been. My phone had been buzzing in my pocket since approximately 5 minutes after I'd turned it back on at the airport, and I'd been ignoring it with the dedication of someone who'd earned the right to be unreachable. But curiosity, that terrible, dangerous thing, finally got the better of me around 1:30 p.m., and I pulled out my phone to see what fresh hell awaited me in my notifications. 73 missed calls. 73. I had to check twice because surely that number couldn't be right. But nope. Between Clara, Gloria, and various relatives who I'd literally never received a phone call from in my entire life, they'd managed to blow up my phone like I was some kind of fugitive who'd stolen the crown jewels instead of just a guy who'd decided not to cook Thanksgiving dinner. The texts were a journey through the 5 stages of grief, all compressed into my message inbox. Clara started out confused. "Where are you?" And "Marcus, this isn't funny." Then progressed to panicked. "Please come home." And "Everyone's asking where you are." And finally landed on angry. "How could you do this to me?" And "My mother is having a breakdown." Gloria's texts were shorter, but somehow more threatening, like she was texting in all caps even when she wasn't. There were messages from cousins I'd met maybe twice, Aunt Patricia asking if I had the recipe for cranberry sauce, and Uncle Gary with a simple "Dude, I respect it." Oncoming fist. I scrolled through them all, sipping my coconut drink, feeling absolutely nothing but a mild amusement at the chaos I'd caused by simply refusing to participate in my own exploitation. These people had my number, literally and figuratively, and they'd been calling it in for years, expecting me to just show up and perform without question, without appreciation, without even basic human consideration. Well, not today, Satan. Not today. I opened up my camera, positioned myself so the ocean was perfectly visible in the background. All that gorgeous blue water and sunny sky that screamed, "I'm living my best life." And put on my sunglasses for maximum effect. I took about 15 selfies because, let's be honest, getting the right angle is an art form, and I wanted this one to really capture the energy of a man who'd just discovered what self-respect felt like. The final photo was perfect. Me, grinning like an idiot, sunglasses on, coconut drink in hand, paradise behind me, and absolutely zero regrets written all over my face. I opened the family group chat, the one Gloria had created called Hartfield Family Thanksgiving 2024, with like 40 people in it, and I typed out my magnum opus, my Declaration of Independence, my middle finger disguised as a friendly update. "Thanksgiving in paradise. Tell Gloria the turkey's her problem now. Desert Island airplane hibiscus." I hit send and watched the little delivered notification pop up, imagining the chaos that was about to erupt when everyone saw it. Clara would probably throw her phone. Gloria would demand someone track my location. Uncle Gary would laugh his ass off. I didn't care. I was 3,000 miles away, holding a coconut with rum in it, and their opinions couldn't reach me here. Then I did something I should have done hours ago. I held down the power button on my phone and turned it completely off. Not on silent, not on airplane mode, but completely off, watching the screen go dark with the satisfaction of someone closing the door on a chapter of their life that had seriously overstayed its welcome. Another round. Maria appeared again, eyeing my empty coconut. Absolutely, I said, and keep them coming. I'm celebrating. Celebrating what? She asked, taking the empty coconut. My divorce from family obligation, I said, and she laughed like she'd heard that one before, but still appreciated it. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blissful blur of tropical drinks, warm sunshine, and the revolutionary concept of doing absolutely nothing because I wanted to do absolutely nothing. I watched other tourists, families building sandcastles, couples walking hand in hand, solo travelers reading books, and I realized that none of them looked stressed. Nobody was checking their watch every 5 minutes or mentally calculating cooking times or worrying about whether their mother-in-law would approve of their napkin folding technique. They were just existing, being human, enjoying the moment without turning it into some performative exercise in perfection. What a concept! Around sunset, I walked down to the water and stood there with my feet in the ocean, watching the sky turn those impossible shades of orange and pink that make you understand why people write poetry and paint pictures and generally lose their minds over nature. The water was warm, the sand was soft, and I felt this overwhelming sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in months, maybe years, if I was being honest with myself. I thought about Clara back home, probably still angry, definitely embarrassed, hopefully starting to realize that maybe she'd taken me for granted. I thought about Gloria, her perfect Thanksgiving ruined, forced to confront the reality that you can't just delegate everything to other people and expect them to smile through it. I thought about all those relatives eating burned turkey and soupy mashed potatoes, learning the hard way that good food